President. My question is to the Honourable Penny Sharpe, Minister for Environment, representing the Minister for Planning and Public Spaces. Minister, local government planning laws and conservation zoning classifications are having an increasingly negative impact on farmers and private landowners in rural and regional New South Wales. Many landowners subject to conservation-related classifications, such as environmental conservation or C2, C3 and C4 zones, are effectively required to manage and maintain their private land as if it were a national park or reserve, without adequate support or compensation for loss. Minister, what measures is the government taking to ensure that conservation zones and covenants on private land do not disproportionately burden farmers and private landowners with responsibilities that serve broader public biodiversity objectives?
The Honourable Penny Sharpe.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr President. I thank the member for his question. Look, I acknowledge his concern, but there's a few different points that are interlinked here. This issue is mostly a planning issue, and I note that he's asked me in my capacity as representing Minister Scully. Any of the bits that I don't pick up in this answer, I will take on notice and give you some more information. This is not something that, as I said, I am deeply familiar with, but I am aware of some of the issues that the member has raised. A conservation zone under planning law is very different to a conservation covenant, which is voluntary. I'm advised that the primary purpose of land use zones, including conservation zones under the standard instrument local environment plan, is to guide future development of the land. The conservation zone typically applies to land with a very high conservation value, where development is constrained in order to protect those values. However, conservation zones do not prevent landholders from managing their land. Routine land management activities such as maintaining fencing, internal roads, farm track and essential infrastructure can continue to occur. Similarly, removal of dead or dying trees and clearing that is a risk to human life and property can also take place. The Biodiversity and Conservation SEP contains further information on land management activities that can take place on conservation zone land. I can also provide the following information around covenants placed on private land, and the key thing here to note is that these are voluntary and at the discretion of the landholder. These are different to the conservation zones under planning law. Voluntary conservation covenants are managed largely by the Biodiversity Conservation Trust, that's my agency. The BCT is managing 2,536 private land conservation agreements with landholders across more than 2.1 million hectares in the state. Since its establishment, the BCT has invested over $400 million in private land conservation, held in trust to cover annual management payments to conservation agreement plans. These provide value to landholders in ongoing fashion. More than 73% of all funded agreements managed by the BCT are managed in perpetuity. Private land conservation agreement holders are protecting at least 302 threatened species, some not protected by national parks or reserves. These landholders are valued stewards of the land and of ecosystems. I note for the members' information that many, if not most, landholders who voluntarily place covenants on their land do so while you're still using other parts of their land for agriculture or other economic purposes. These two things can go hand in hand, and these are the outcomes that we seek to do. This government spends a lot of time working closely with farmers and other representative bodies to actually work out that none of us can deal with conservation on our own, that we all have a role to play and will continue to do that. But the actual other detail of that, I'll seek advice from the Planning Minister and provide it to you.
A supplementary question, the Honourable Robert Borsak.
Thank you, Mr President. Will the government establish a consistent framework for compensation, rate relief or financial support for such affected landholders, the subject of current conservation zones and covenants on farming and private land?
The Honourable Penny Sharpe.
I've got some advice in relation to this. As I said, I'll get some more information around this. But the framework for compensation is not something. There are frameworks for compensation in a range of different ways. My advice is that in relation to the conservation zones C2, C3, and C4, this is a zoning issue, and there isn't a compensation framework payable. In relation to conservation covenants, again, as these are largely requested by landholders, they're not compensatable, but they actually are payments are made to actually manage that land. But I'll anything that I've missed, I'll pick up and come back to you.
Thank you.